And most of the time when we start off this show, there's like a 20-second lead in. So people who are watching it after we've gone live are probably sitting here watching an ad right now. So we do like to do a little bit of a lead in for those folks and give some people plenty of time to, get in, get their cold refreshments going, some snacks as we kind of start the Car Guy and Six Fan Show on this Thursday evening. Welcome, guys. My name is Jason. I am the co-host of the Car Guy and Six Fan Show. You've made it to my channel this week. My co-host sitting right next door to me is...
I'm Grant Tommy. I'm straight Six Fan here on YouTube. That makes me Six Fan of this operation. By dumb luck, while I'm not in Canada, I'm drinking the exact same beer Jason is tonight. So this did come from his beer fridge in the garage. So ironic enough, we both grabbed the same thing. But excited. We are powered by the Get Out and Drive podcast. It's a great partnership we have here at the Car Guy and Six Fan Show. So definitely go check them out at getoutanddrive.com. But it's my pleasure to introduce our next guest. And, this is season 8. It's our greatest hits season. And we've been trying to bring back the parts and pieces that were the best hits from previous seasons, whether that was a famous guest. But now we'd like to do a product highlight or a manufacturer's highlight. So our next guest, Chris Adams from ADTR.net is our guest. So we'll send it on down to him for a second. And Chris, why don't you just give us a brief little intro of yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Adams with ADTR Performance. We specialize in Crown Vics, so it's a very weird niche market. But superchargers, manual transmission swaps, suspension stuff, you name it, whatever you want for a Crown Vic, Grand Marquis, Town Car, Marauder, we want to have it. We want to be the one-stop shop so that you come to us and we can get you handled.
That's awesome. And as you guys know, if you've been a part of this channel for any length of time at all, there's been a lot of Panthers cross your screen, from Grandma to Blackjack to now Townie Soprano is what we're calling the Lincoln. So make sure you guys, if you're not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, make sure you're doing that. And also make sure you go over and give this guy a subscribe too, because as a co-host, the next week's show will be on Grant's channel. I do want to take a second for some housekeeping. Like Grant said, we are part of the Get Out and Drive podcast, and we are launching what we're calling a backseat episode tonight. It's actually up now, but don't go there right now. I want you to stay tuned and watch the live show. And when you're done, go over and check out the new podcast on Get Out and Drive podcast, because it's just John and I chatting it's almost backstage. Our sound engineer, Paul, just kind of clicked that record button one time. We were just shooting the breeze, and it turned into an episode. So it's funny. It's some great listening. And Grant, we've also got some folks over in the chat. Why don't you introduce who's in the chat and who's joined us tonight?
Yeah, good number of people. Will's Wheels, Everything's Broken Garage, Turlo's Garage, Joanne Meyer, of course, helping moderate tonight. And then we've got Jason Rock, we've got Gary Mathis, The Bandit, Uncle Squirrel, Martin's Garage, Papel on Cycles. So welcome in, everybody. Enough about all the house cleaning, all the reminders and everything. Jason, why don't you kick us off with the first question for Chris?
Absolutely. And I'm pretty excited to ask this first question because, I didn't realize how big of a passion that I had for these Panther cars until you buy your first one. But I got to go back to probably about 15 years ago when my grandfather passed away. He had an 82 LTD Crown. And, I managed to get a hold of that. And back then I didn't know what these cars were. That one was kind of a piece of junk. So I drove it for a little while, ended up selling it. But here we are, again, 15 years later, buying Grandma and really falling in love with the platform, with the car, the moderate stock power. We always talk about how underpowered these things are for such a big car. But at the end of the day, I want to know, what the heck happened, Chris, to you that you decided I need to start a business around this program, around these cars?
I was dropped on my head. I think that was basically it. No, I just like being different. And when I got my first car, which is the red rocket couch behind us, I wanted nothing to do with it. I was an ungrateful kid who got a car from mom and dad, and I wanted to immediately trade it in and get rid of it so that I could get a classic 60s Mustang like all of my friends had, so that I could, fit in. Because I was always into cars, and nothing screams performance like a Crown Victoria. So I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with this? And they said, no, you're going to keep it. It's a safe car. You know, it had dual airbags and it had seat belts and all of the things that my parents deemed necessary for my first car. And so I'm like, okay, fine. Can I modify it? They're like, sure. What could you possibly do with a Crown Vic? And luckily, I mean, back then I didn't know anything. I went to what was it, PAW, which is a performance auto parts store out here, and I found somebody that didn't just blow me off. And he's like, well, it's kind of like a Mustang. It's got a 4.6 liter in it. You can do this and this and this and this. And so all hope wasn't lost, but there was really nothing available specifically for it. So over the years, I just started making parts, and people continually wanted them, which at the time I'm like, who else is dumb enough to modify a Crown Vic? But it's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, which is cool.
Well, Chris, there's so much about your story that resonates with me. I mean, very similar. That's the brainchild. Straight Six Fans, all about my first vehicle, my 95 Ford F-150 with the inline six. And it was the same thing. It's like, I had dreams of something much cooler than this fleet old construction truck. But okay, well, let's just own it and let's be different and let's just, see where this can go. And so my whole channel's built around this idea of offbeat hot rodding and to be different. Like we've seen enough Mustangs, we've seen enough Camaros at the car shows. And so I think that's how I've gravitated to you over time. I know I saw an article, I think it was in Hot Rod Magazine, about the flagship car behind you, the Rocket Couch. And so let's talk about that for a second. Where's it at now? I mean, I'm sure it's been through like 8 or 7 different iterations, but take us through the journey of, where it all started and where you're at today with that car.
I can't even keep track of all of the different versions that it's been through. I mean, like in high school, it had these god-awful Fittipaldi wheels that I thought were just so cool. They were 17x8s and the front offset wasn't right, so it was sticking out a little bit and rubbing the tires and tearing the tires up when I tried to lower it. And it was dumb, but it got me into the car and into being like accepting that it's okay to be different and not just to be like everybody else with the Mustang. Not that Mustangs aren't cool. I love Mustangs. And, ultimately, if I had a bigger garage, I would have one. I had a 90 notchback that I loved, but I sold it to buy one of our other famous cars, Casper, which was the white 04 Police Interceptor that we built everything on, like the manual transmission swap kit, the supercharger system, the coilover system. And so we sold the Mustang to get that, which ultimately got our business exponentially larger. But to circle back to the couch, it's always been, we were going to start small and it just snowballed out of control. So like my friend, this was right after the PI cylinder heads came out. And so non-PI versus PI, and like 2001 on the Crown Vics or 99 on the Mustangs, the performance improved heads, you could put those on a non-PI block, you bump the compression up, and you gain horsepower. I'm like, awesome, let's do that. And so I'm collecting all these parts. I'm having the parts shipped to my buddy's house that he's found all these good deals so that I can hide it from my mom. And then and then he's like, hey, I found somebody that has a really good deal. He was a factory racer for Paxton. We've got a supercharger system that'll work on this. Okay, great. And then it just kept building and building and building. And so like it was such a cluster because it's a 92. Luckily, it wasn't the bastard block with the AOD transmission. It was the AODE. And so there was some things that were salvageable, but like ultimately to get it to run well, I had a friend who came and basically rewired the whole car and made it a 2001 and switched everything from the coil towers to the individual coil on plugs, and changed it all from an EEC4 wiring setup to an EEC5 so that the tuner could actually tune it. And like back in the day, well, he's still kind of, I mean, he's still the man, but Jerry, like when you hear of the J mod on the transmissions, like Jerry Roblowski was a Ford engineer who was tuning. And he basically was like, I hate this car. I want to blow it up. And the only reason that I'm still dealing with all of this mess is because you're a nice guy. So if he hadn't seen that I was a nice guy and just blew me off, like who knows where we'd be with the car. But it was a Paxton Novi 2000, built internals, which, I mean, like I could go on for hours of all of the crap that we figured out when we swapped from PI to non-PI and or non-PI to PI and building things, because that was when the 2-valve was still relatively new and a lot of the big players weren't around. So, you know, we had the best flowing PI heads back in the day that all of the corral and all of the internet forums had seen. And then they got wiped out on the first dyno hit because somebody left an O-ring off on the oil pickup tube and it starved itself of oil and it was all for naught. It's like, damn it. So the shop that was doing the work on the car dubbed the car the Crown Bitch, because every step of the way it kept fighting us. And so like a smart person would have seen that it's an omen from the car gods. Go away. Don't do it. But I'm an idiot. And so like it has gotten exponentially worse over the years. And so now its current version is a Vortec YSI-B. It's the biggest blower that they have available. We're going to be pumping hopefully about 20 to 30 pounds of boost through it. It's a Boss block that's been stroked to 5.3 liters. It's got ported trick flow heads. And we're shooting for hopefully, I mean, single digits and needing the parachute that I put on it. So
wow,
that's it's gotten exponentially crazier over the years. And like we just rewired it for a Holley standalone and put a cage in it. So now it's like I just need to get off my ass and actually go finish putting it together. Like it's so close. I just need to make it more of a priority.
So first of all, I've got to apologize to everybody because I'm literally sitting here playing with a pen and I've got a piece of paper here. I'm supposed to be writing things down as you're talking, Chris, because you were saying so many things. I'm thinking like, wow. And I'm like, oh, that's a good, I wrote nothing down. So I have no real informative question to ask you other than,
that's what the replay's for, Jason.
That's what the replay's for, I guess. But I just want to go back into what you were saying there a little bit. So when you first started, I think the idea was probably the same way that I was, the same way my son is, the same way probably thousands of people are when they pick up their first Panther platform car, especially the ones with the 4.6 in it, is how do I peak a little bit more? How do I stretch a little bit more power out of this gutless slug? And you know, you're sitting there, you're trying to figure out, okay, is it the 1-inch space or the throttle body? No, because I ain't doing nothing for you. Is it true dual exhaust? No, not likely. It's probably not doing a whole lot for you. Is it the cutting out the cats? Is it the whatever it's going to be? Like at the end of the day, everything that you do to these cars, every little bit helps in the long run. But tell us, you know, how did you get to the point where you realize I can actually get a little bit of cheap power out of this 2-valve? Like what would be the number one thing you would say to anybody who's going to watch this down the road to say, okay, if there's one thing you're going to do to your 2-valve, this is it to help with X?
The good thing about the 2-valve is that they are basically bulletproof to a point. They don't make a lot of power, but you can throw boost at it, like 8 pounds of boost. If you keep it under like the 400 to the tire, 420 to the tire area, like it'll survive and it'll take abuse, and it'll take abuse pretty well. But the problem is, 2-valve and performance don't really go hand in hand. Like you have to throw money at it to really get good power out of it. Like underdrive pulleys help. Long tube headers, getting rid of the stock, terrible cats and manifolds helps. And if you throw boost, then it helps exponentially more. But like for just the average Joe, just throwing bits and pieces, the gains are going to be good, but not amazing, right? And so like there are other platforms that you could build and be able to put a throttle body on, or be able to put a relatively small modification on, and it makes a larger difference just because the engine is just that starved for air or whatever, right? But
well, and one thing that we're dealing with too is we're dealing with a 4,000-pound rock. Really, I mean you got a big 4-door sedan, body on frame. You're not dealing with a unibody Mustang that weighs 1,000 pounds less, right? So
right, but I mean, like Mustangs have gotten heavier over the years, but then they've also gotten more power over the years too. So it's like it's kind of a trade-off. I mean, the vehicles are super heavy. So my suggestion to anybody that's starting, exhaust, because then it sets you up for future mods, and it sounds better. I mean, and let's be honest, like sound is a lot. Whether it actually makes it faster or not, like the long tube headers definitely do help. And like we've had people dyno test before and after on headers and exhaust. And I think on a Crown Vic, I want to say it's somewhere between 18 to 19 horsepower to the tires, which it's a big chunk of change, right, for headers and a full exhaust system. But it is noticeable and it sounds better.
It's a quality of life issue at that point.
Yeah, it makes you smile, right? But like you don't like gears is a must, because that doesn't necessarily give you horsepower, but it helps get Bertha up from a stop, right, and actually start accelerating. So like 373s and 410s really are a must, and then it depends on tire size too. I mean, I've got customers with big wheels, 26-inch wheels that are donked out or whatever you want to call them, that we've got like 5 series gears in it, because it's effectively like a 373 by the time you factor in the tire diameter and all that. So
yeah, once upon a time, and not that this is a great science, but there was a forum that they said basically every inch in diameter of tire size you add, think about if you had the same size tires as you used to, drop in your rear end ratio by 0.1. And it's not exact, but it's actually it's a pretty good rule of thumb to help people realize, okay, what gears do I need if I'm adding 3 inches of tire or whatever. But
yeah.
Chris, there's kind of 2-part question. So before we get too far down, I wanted to help put a timestamp on when this all started. I regret if you mentioned it before, but like, was this like 96 or whatever? So that's part A. Part B is what do you think about? I mean, the whole appeal of the Panther platform is there's plenty of them out there. They were a fleet car, they were cop cars, they were cabs. So there's no shortage of the inventory of the cars. But why do you think there's not like budget entry level budget mods like the those long tube headers are like almost $1,000 for the set, like
almost $1,800 for the set.
Yeah, okay, all right. It's been a while since I checked them up, but yeah, like so it seems like there's a discrepancy between like tons of cars, but everything aftermarket seems like you made like 4 of them a year.
Yes. Okay. So first part, like I was in high school, I graduated 2000. And so like I got the car 97, 98. I was a sophomore. I was a little bit older, so I got the car earlier. And I was, one of the first ones to drive. So everybody was like, "Hell yeah, Chris has got a car. Let's go be hooligans." And then like all of us were car guys. Like we weren't the jocks. We weren't, that was our clique, was the car guys, right? And so we just hung out and did stupid car stuff, and played Gran Turismo and watched Initial D and all of the things that came with that era. And then the business really took off. Well, it started in 2001. It was three of us that decided we needed a resale license so that we could not pay sales tax and get discounts. And then it turns out that's illegal. Like you need to actually have a legit business selling parts to be able to justify all of that. So when we started making things, like we made cold air intake pipes out of just, steel, and, put open air filters, and everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, there's a cold air intake. We need to buy that," and then it just got progressively bigger. We started porting upper intake plenums and stuff like that, and people started buying stuff. And we're like, okay, cool. And it was a hobby business for a long time. But I mean, really in the last, my son was born in 2011, and I thought like the world is ending. This is terrible. I'm never going to have any time for the business. And it got exponentially larger since then, and now to the point where it's actually sole business. And I'm not running multiple different businesses. It's just this now, which is cool. And then your next question about why are parts so expensive? Why are there not cheap modifications? The big thing is there is no aftermarket for these cars. I am the aftermarket. I mean, for a lack of better terms, like there's nobody else that really caters to them. And I mean, like there's some things that you can take from a 4.6 Mustang and apply it, but a lot of this stuff is Crown Vic specific. And so like the big thing that has helped us is everybody and their moms deciding that the 03 and newer front cross members, aluminum, subframes and all that are great. It's the next Mustang 2. It's the next, what else? The Jaguar, front suspension that everybody would use for hot rods. So like the coilover package was because Ride Tech made a coilover package for the cars, for the front. And I'm like, well, why can't we use that on a Crown Vic? They did all the hard engineering. Let's finish the deal and make an all-in-one package of everything. And like the Ride Tech stuff is so cool because it's got a 1,000,000-mile warranty. So you can't argue with that. If they leak, if there's any problems with them, they stand behind it for 1,000,000 miles. And I've got one guy that is actively trying to put 1,000,000 miles on them. He just had his first warranty claim with them. And when they got him, they're like, what the hell? Like these things are trashed. And I'm like, yeah, he's got 250,000 miles on him. They're like, oh my God, he puts a lot of miles on his car. That's ridiculous. And so they just gave him a fresh set. They're like, you deserve it. Here you go. But like we try and take what little aftermarket stuff there is and then apply it to a Crown Vic. So like going to SEMA is entertaining because you're looking at the trends, you're looking at all of the cool new stuff that's coming out. And then you have to like, okay, that's really cool. Can I find a company? Can I find out if there are enough people in the Crown Vic world that would want this? And then I go to bat with the manufacturers to try and get stuff.
Well, and I think just as we're scrolling through the website here to see all the different stuff that you have to offer, like one of the things that I find is that, anything that you can buy for any other performance car, and I want to maybe go back to the Mustang because it's probably the closest thing in comparison to these cars as far as drivetrain goes. like if you want to upgrade brakes, I saw Willwood brake kits. If you want to upgrade suspension, you've got urethane bushings. If you want just some cheaper drilled and vented rotors, you've got all of that stuff available. Somebody else has done the engineering for you if you want to go in and just make a click and buy it. And like you said, we talked a little bit about it backstage that, over the years of these Panther platforms, there's been certain different, I don't want to say generations, but iterations of the chassis and suspensions and this and that. Some were a little more customizable than others, vice versa. The idea is that when you look at what's available for the aftermarket, you said it yourself, you are the aftermarket for these cars. So if somebody wants to go all out and build one of these things into a 4,000-pound race car, you can do whatever you want just by clicking and ordering and having it shipped right to your door from the ADTR.net website. My question is, who's the brains of the operation that said, I'm going to investigate every part to see what does work, what does cross over, what fits, and so that we can have a huge inventory at the click of a button for all these people? Was that you? Did you do all the research to make sure all these parts fit?
I mean, for the most part, yeah. I mean, we've had a bunch of different cars over the years, and we know what works and what doesn't. So like I put KYB shocks on my 98 Crown Vic, and after driving it, I noticed that the front end was kind of floaty, and I'm like, no, this should not be. Then we tried the Bilsteins. Money, they're great. We sell a ton of them, but Bilstein only goes up to 2002, which sucks. And then, when I approached Bilstein, they said, for 03 plus cars, sure, yeah, we'll make them, but we need like 1 million sets. I'm like, okay. So that was basically the middle finger. You don't want to help us. Thank you so much. So, but like we've tried and we see what works and what doesn't work. And so like a lot of the stuff that we sell are things that we know that we can give good tech support on, that we can say, yes, we tried this, it was good. There are things that I can get through different vendors, but I refuse to sell them because at the end of the day, I want the customers to get the best parts that they can. And I don't want them to go down that road, of trying the KYBs that didn't work great, on the older cars. But what's funny is the KYBs on the newer cars are actually pretty good. They got the valving pretty much right. And those are the only ones that we sell for the 03 to 11s for a stock replacement, unless you go coilover.
Well, Chris, while I've never actually owned a Panther platform myself, my Ford Fairmont build, that was the last build on my channel, I did put 17-inch P71 steel wheels on that, but I guess I use that as a bridge to go back to when you talked about the front ends. It's the next Mustang 2 front end. What got internet famous there for a while was everybody wanting to body swap an old F100 on a Crown Vic. So how many of your customers, well, again, I guess two-part question. What are your thoughts on body swap, all the body swaps, but how many of your customers do you find are those weirdos?
I mean, a lot. Like I just shipped a supercharger system an hour before I joined for a guy that did a body swap. And we kind of work with him to make a supercharger system work. They've got different, space, confinements. But yeah, I mean, like I talk to a lot of people. Some people are just putting the front cross member on, and other people are doing the complete frame swap. And like probably one of the more famous frame swaps was the Crown Hick that Hot Rod Garage did with Tony and Lucky. And like that has gotten us a ton of people interested. And that was a great deal. And that truck turned out fantastic.
Well, and I think like there's like I watch a lot of or I used to anyways watch a lot of YouTube that people would do either the body swap or they were taking the front end and they were mounting it up to their F100s and doing all the work that was necessary to the frame and to getting everything to fit and blah, blah, blah. To some degree, one of the things that you can do by doing a body swap simply is you're getting the complete drivetrain and ride already on the frame. It's already there. All you got to do is put something on top of it to make it look cool. My biggest thing about these cars is the way they ride, the comfort of that ride, no matter what. When I went from the stock, 16-inch tire to an 18, I thought, am I going to sacrifice ride quality by going with a low profile tire? Minimal, very minimal. You maintain that ride quality. The fuel economy on a stock 2-valve is, especially when they got the 273 gears, you're pushing 25 to 28 miles per gallon, depending on your speed limit, whatever you're doing. And it's just, people look for different things when they're driving these cars. I've got a 22-year-old kid who has an 04 Crown. He's already talking about a manual swap. He doesn't care about the whole, horsepower. I mean, he does, but his priority is, putting a stick behind this thing. And, I said, look,
he's right.
Absolutely. And if you're going to do it, then we're going to do it to the point where you're going to let me record it so we can do the video and show the progress on it. Because everything that he does to his car, he just does it. He doesn't want to be bothered with the whole production and the videoing and the struggles and this and that. He just wants to push through it himself. There's there's Facebook groups dedicated solely to manual swapping these cars. And as a fella who provides the kits that are available to do so, I believe, if I remember correctly, you provide right down to the transmission as well, do you not?
We can. Most people, when they do the manual swap, they're doing it because their transmission decided it didn't want to work anymore. And so instead of spending, $2-3 on rebuilding their automatic, well, I'd rather put that money towards making it a manual and making it more fun to drive.
Right.
So like most of the people are going to junkyards, they're finding, 3650 transmissions or T45s. And then I'm supplying other parts. I mean, like I got some guys that literally go to a junkyard, they take the used flywheel, the used pressure plate and disc and everything, and they take all of it and they put it in their car. And it's like, you know what? That's cool. I don't have time when things fail to then go back in and take everything apart. So like for me, it's worth it because I'd rather just put new stuff in, not think about it. So like I give everybody the option. Our 5-speed swap kits is basically what I feel are the best parts available that are, good brands, good quality. We've used in our builds over the years and can stand behind it. And then that gives them at least good stuff that they're putting in there. If your transmission is questionable, like really you should have a check before you throw it in, but some people don't.
Well, you can really say that tongue in cheek because I mean we all know that the AOD transmissions or the AODE or whatever they call them in these cars, they're perfect for grandma and grandpa in Florida who are doing 70 mile an hour down the highway, bumping into everything. Like the idea is if you want performance out of your car and have fun at the same time, a manual swap is the way to go. I mean, you're just, these transmissions are not made to horse around with. They're not made to abuse, although, taxis, police over the years, we all have. I mean, that's just the way it is. For the guy who is mechanically inclined, who has all the tools he needs to do so, how would you rate a manual swap on one of these cars, say on a scale of 1 to 10? What skill level or maybe it's not skill, maybe it's patience. What skill level do you need to do one of these manual swaps on these cars?
I mean, it's not rocket science, but at the same time, you're cutting a hole in your floor. Like that's kind of like a point of no return, right? But like guys that do frame swaps and all that, like that's no big deal. So it kind of depends on the level that you're comfortable with. But like, I don't think that a 5-speed swap is particularly difficult. There's a lot of little bits and pieces that you got to do. The 5-speed is definitely easier than the 6-speed swap. When we, like, Pierre is one of the original guys that did the whole manual swap, or started it, I guess. And, he did a 5-speed, and he kind of helped us in the beginning know what we were getting into, because on our Casper car, we wanted to make a 6-speed swap, because at that point, the car was already supercharged. I drove it like I stole it. Like, it was always abused. And I knew that a stock transmission wasn't going to handle it. So, like, our 6-speed swap kits takes a T56 Magnum that has a 700 foot-pound torque rating. I know that there's no reason why that should break unless I'm really an idiot. So like, then we started making those kits, but you're buying a brand new non-stock transmission. It's expensive, right? Like, it's more than some people have paid for their cars. So, like, that's why we then kind of went back in and, like, look, you don't have to do the 6-speed. The 6-speed's badass. You can be super aggressive on gearing. You've got that extra gear so that you can cruise at 100 miles an hour and still get amazing miles per gallon. But that's not necessarily for everybody, especially with the price tag. So, like, the 5-speed swap gives them really good components and a lower price tag to get into, and it's not difficult. Like, for me, I hate wiring. Like, wiring is my kryptonite. I can't do it. Yeah, like, I paid to have that car rewired because I knew that my OCD, like, every wire would need to be in the same place in the loom, and it would just be bad, right? So, like, the wiring is something that I think is hard, but some people, when they look at it, they go, oh, well, we just need to look at, a 3650 has the reverse light switch. It has the speedo sending unit. We just need to figure out on the stock Crown Vic, on the wiring harness, which ones we need to tap into, and you're done. Like, it's not rocket science, but for me, that's kind of rocket science.
Well, Chris, a lot of things you said there. Well, first off, as class of 2000, I was class of 2003. So as a freshman in high school, I'm sure I would have been, like, paying attention to what you were doing in the high school parking lot with that Crown Vic. But and then going through transmissions, I was really good at that in high school as well. I went through a lot of M5ODs in the old F-150. But so much about our era or our age. I suspect then your father's probably a similar age as mine, and he grew up. My dad was always telling stories about his high school friends who had a 70 Chevelle. It wasn't an SS 454; it's just an SS 396, right? Like, so all of his stories about his buddies who had Camaros and Chevelles, and I mean, even a Torino's cool, right? By the time we're in high school, it's like, I mean, the Mustang was rear wheel drive and V8 powered. And then I think that's where the Crown Vic comes in. So by the time 2003 rolls around, and the Mercury Marauder, which is arguably kind of the pinnacle of the Panther platform, it kind of, like, reinvigorated or reinstalled hope. Like, hey, that V8 rear wheel drive cars might actually be a thing. Yeah, it's still got 4 doors, but, like, I guess take me back to that point in time. Like, I remember when I was reading press clippings about this Marauder coming out and getting excited. What is the Marauder to you and to this cult following?
Well, I mean, the Marauder, like, when I started, it was just, Crown Vic's great. Marauder, okay, that's pretty cool. They put a Cobra motor into a Crown Vic with, like, the best of the stuff. And I remember my friend Phil and I went and test drove one. Why they let us test drive one, that was, like, one of the dumbest things, because the first thing we did was go out on the main boulevard and just let it rip. And both of us looked at each other and we're like, okay, it sounds cool. It's not what I wanted, right? It wasn't enough. And so, like, that's why everybody with the Marauder always says the first mods you do, cold air intake, exhaust, 410 gears, and a tune. That's how it should have come from the factory. I mean, I know that they did it that way because, like, why would you have a 4-door sedan that's faster than your Mustang, right? That's your flagship. That's your, wow, look at me. now we've got a Marauder that's faster. Well, we can't have that. So, I mean, like, I've always loved the Marauder. And so when we did the Crown Vic supercharger systems, the Marauder still had somebody that was kind of taking care of them, kind of like, you know, I am to the Crown Vic people. But then he went out of business. And so then the Marauder guys are like, hey, we want a centrifugal supercharger system for Marauders. Can you make one? Of course I can make one, sure. That was perfect because that gave me an excuse to go buy a Marauder. So I searched and searched and searched, and I finally found my unicorn. I got a blue 03 Marauder that has now got, it's got our air suspension system on all four corners. It's got the supercharger system. It's got all the stainless works stuff. It's kind of got, it's another rolling billboard for the company. But yeah, like the Marauder, it's the pinnacle basically because it's got the best of the best in it. And I mean, really, in my mind, 03, 04, like when the Terminator was out, like there were so many cool cars from then. I mean, like, obviously now I'm dating myself, right? But like when I think 03, 04, I'm like, oh, that's not that old. And then you start doing the math, you're like, oh, damn, no, that is old. I'm old. This is not good. But I would still rather have, like, my fleet is old cars, right? And so like the big thing, and you know, I'm in California, everybody's like, oh my God, 2035, you're not going to be able to buy a new car. I don't care. I'm going to be buying 2003 and 2004 cars because that's what I want. I mean, I got a 2000 Excursion, you know, diesel. Like I've got all of these old cars, and people are like, man, the headlights you can't see out of. You know, they've got terrible brakes. They got all these things. I'm like, I don't care. Like, it brings me back, you know?
Well, I mean, seeing how everyone just wants to date themselves tonight. So I've got probably another few years on you, Chris, but I agree with you 100%. We're probably talking like 6 or 7, but anyway, like, yes, when you grew up, so I graduated high school in 94. So, you know, we're growing up with a little bit different vehicles, but I mean, at the same time, and they're all out there. They're all still available. But yes, the headlights were horrible. You couldn't brake for nothing. ABS was becoming, you know, a thing. So whatever. But at the end of the day, we all chose to take a path of which direction we wanted to go. My newest vehicle that I own right now is my 04 Grand Marquis. That's my newest vehicle. Everything else, I've got 5. They're all older. So people will say, like you said, you know, in 2035 in California, you won't be able to buy a new one. Well, that's fine, because in 2035, even if I stick with the same program I'm on now, it'll still be a 15-year-old car that I'm going to buy. But to me, there's not a whole lot in today's cars that I would really want to buy that I'm okay with going. And you know what? If I want to pound the crap out of it, yeah, I'm going to do that. If I break something, well, there's another one right around the corner because the parts are so readily available. And I think that's what guys go when it comes back to the whole hot rodding thing. You know, let's take Panther platform out of the equation for a second. Square body trucks, F-150s, Chevelles, Mustangs, Camaros. They made a pile of these cars over the years that the parts at one time were so readily available. Okay, let's bring in the more modern Panther platforms, and I'm going to say probably, you know, 97 and up, and you've got a whole new breed of hot rod potential, because there was just so friggin' many of these cars made between fleet models and civilian models, the 3 different brands. There's just so much out there to play with. So, and parts were so interchangeable as far as suspension and drivetrain. One of the things I think that people ask me a lot is, you know, well, what are the best years for Panther platforms? And I find it hard to narrow that down because I haven't owned them all, obviously. I've owned 3 within the 03 and 04 brand, and they say, you know, 04s was the last of the cable-driven throttle body, so those are the best. You know, the up to 02, they had different whatever, or different suspension, or different this. So they were the best. I don't know. What is your opinion on what's the best gears of the Panther platform?
Wow, that's difficult. So I think styling wise, the best gear is the 92 because it doesn't have the grill. It looks like an obese Taurus, right? Like, and it's got good lines. Like, how can you go wrong? I don't know. I guess I'm prejudiced, right? But I would say 92 just because it was the first year, and I like the look of it. I like the no grill thing. As far as like an 02 LX Sport is the next unicorn on my list because it's the best of the 98 to 02. It has all of the stuff that the Marauder has as far as like interior and trim stuff. It obviously doesn't have the Cobra motor, but like those things are awesome. Like I've always wanted one, and now that I'm a certified, Crown Vic nut, I'm gonna probably have to get one of these days. But like as far as performance goes, really the 06 and newer are the ones that perform the best out of the gate. They've got the most horsepower. They've got the 17-inch wheels stock. They've got the 03 plus suspension. People will argue 04 versus 05 plus because of the electronically controlled throttle body and all that. But Marty at Mo's Speed Shop has figured out the tuning for the drive-by-wire and gotten them so that they don't have that terrible lag when you floor it. It's like 1,000, 2,000. Oh, you want me to go now? Okay, cool. I'll go now. So like now you've kind of gotten away from that now. So, I mean, I would say 06 plus.
There you go, folks. That's one of the things that, people are going to watch this episode and they're going to watch right till this point to hear you say that, what's the best one. And I think that there's, when you go to the guy who's providing all the aftermarket parts for this, who knows all the different eras of these cars, who has his own preference, which is totally not what he just said as far as what the best is. Like, you got to take this with a grain of salt. There's going to be people who don't like the aero look. There's going to be people who don't like the older suspension. There's going to be people who don't like the square headlights. It's everyone's personal preference. You mentioned it. You kind of threw Marty out there with the whole tuning thing, and I think that's kind of the next level for us. We've done a lot of little things, and maybe we want to get that extra 10 or 15 horsepower out of it. Maybe rather than doing a J mod, we want to kind of tweak those shift points just a little bit. That's kind of the cheap. And it's not even cheap, I guess. It's like $500, I think, is what he charges for these tunes. But it's the cheaper way to perform a little better, shift a little better, accelerate, all that little stuff kind of all combined into one is to throw a Marty tune on it. And obviously, you're kind of endorsing the Marty tune a little bit. Am I right by saying that?
Yeah, I mean, like, he's tuned our cars. We refer all of our customers to him. So, like, it's a good relationship because I know that he provides really good customer service. And so I just throw stuff his way. Like, I had another tuner that I was referring business to, and he had a bunch of health issues and kind of fell off the map. And I look like, a schmuck because I'm referring people to him and then he's not doing his end of the deal. So, no, I mean, like, he's good people and they do really good work. Plug for Marty. But no, like, the Marty tune is a great way to get started. And I mean, really, I would say gears, like, figure out what the big picture is, like, for the car. Like, are you going to throw a bunch of power at it? No. Okay, fine. Like, maybe just go with 373s or 410s, do the gears and the tune at the same time. And then, like, don't do the J mod. See how you like the transmission tuning first. Because if you don't like it, you can always say, hey, Marty, you know what? I was wrong. I said I wanted a 10 out of 10 on the shifting, but really I need a 7 out of 10. Can you do that for me? He does a couple beep boops. He sends you a new tune, and you don't have to buy a new valve body because you drilled the hole too big,
Well, Chris, you mentioned plugs. You plugged Marty there, and so fair warning, I've got a ton of plugs to drop in here for a second. I promise there is a question coming at the end of this, but did want to hand it over to the chat. Start thinking of your questions. If you have a question for Chris, go ahead and start thinking of that now, and we'll try to get some of those answered. We are powered by the Get Out and Drive podcast, so it is a great relationship, and so we're thankful for what support they give us. We love giving support back to them. And then every dollar in a super chat that comes in, of course, Jason will be taking great notes on that. He didn't take notes earlier, but he'll take notes on that for sure, because we do sometimes, actually most all the time, give something out at the end of the season to kind of reward people for that. So lastly, while again not ever a Crown Vic owner, I can say between my Lincoln Mark 7 rear end and my Fairmont, between my F-150, right here is the 8.8 track lock club. I'm sure all three of us have owned an 8.8 track lock rear end, as you were talking about gears. But Chris, if I'm not mistaken, the rocket couch behind you, you took on a hot rod drag week once upon a time. Is it? First off, hopefully that's correct. But secondly,
No.
No, okay, all right. I was thinking,
plans. And so like I'm purposely building the car so that it can go on drag week, and that is definitely on the list of things to do. I went with a customer in a red Marauder, so maybe that's what you saw red and you're like, oh yeah, drag car, yes, drag week. Yeah, after being on one, like I've got to do it, and I got to do it in my own car for sure.
Well, that's what. Okay, so that's where I was going to go with the question anyway. Was to talk about the experience, or what's the plenty of people out there addicted to it, but just give us your firsthand experience of what drag week was like.
I mean, it was different only because like I didn't know what to expect. Like I'd always watched it on the live feeds, and I've watched 1320 video, their coverage of it, and Rocky Mountain Drag Week and all that. But like to actually be on it, it was crazy. Like there was a lot of driving. I was, co-pilot, and so I was helping, my customer and friend Ryan, swap tires, adjust things, whatever we can to help like unload the car when we got to the event. And then, when we were driving afterwards, he was just jamming out and, balls to the wall to the next checkpoint. And I was in the passenger seat with the laptop working, because I was working while I was on drag week, trying to fill orders and get things done. So, doing it again, as much as I love my customers, I'm not going to be working. I'm going to be gone. There's a lot to, to keep track of. And then just because of, it's me and this car is the Crown bitch, things I'm sure will go wrong. So I'm sure I'll bring all of the parts that I think are going to break and then end up needing none of them. So hopefully, when it does break, if it breaks, then I'll be able to find somebody somewhere that has the weird, stuff that's on that car, because it's such a Frankenstein.
So even though we've opened it up for questions, I want to go clear back to, it looks like 17 minutes in to the live stream. Papillon Cycles had a quick question for you. He's talking about intake manifold on his buddy's car. They already replaced it. Is there a good performance manifold available for the two valve?
Yes and no. We've got the Edelbrock intake manifolds now after waiting a year to get them, but they're not for everybody. So like if you are putting it on an otherwise stock car, terrible decision. It's a short runner intake. I'm sure that it will run. I just don't know how well it's going to run. And then like you've got to get, fuel rails. You've got to adapt them to the car. Like the professional products, what were some of the, there were like one or two other ones that you could get that are no longer available anymore. Were maybe better, but like the fit and finish on some of them were so terrible. Like you had to send it to a machine shop to plane them and make sure that everything was straight before you put it on. Like that was a part that I could have gotten and sold on my webpage, but I knew the horror stories. I'm like, nope, we're not selling those. And like the Ford Performance intake manifold is just a stock replacement intake manifold. but we stopped selling those because Ford, in their infinite genius, we kept breaking off the coolant nipples in the back that are plastic, and over time they get brittle. Well, when it's being shipped, they break. Yeah, they're gone, right? And so they're like, okay, let's put it in a bigger box and put more, bubble wrap and stuff around it. Well, they put it in a bigger box, but that bigger box dimensionally is so expensive to ship. It cost me like $80 to ship an intake manifold. And I charge the customer 20. I'm like, I'm losing money. I don't make $60 on an intake manifold profit. So it's like, nope, we're done with those. So like, if you can find a Ford Performance intake manifold, normally those are less expensive than the factory Fords. If you don't care about cost of shipping, hit me up. I can get them for you, but it's going to end up costing on shipping.
Well, we had a couple other questions from the chat. Actually, two different ones that asking us a little bit different question, but it's really the same all in all. So I'll generalize it. And basically, they're pointing towards whatever your thoughts, or have you ever seen a diesel swap in a Crown Vic?
Yes, there was. I want to say there's been at least one, possibly two. The guy lifted it, which was awesome. Like I mentioned to Jason that I wanted to do that before. I want to do an off-road lifted one, but yeah, he put in. And forgive me, my diesel knowledge is very minimal. I've got a 7.3, and I know that's the best as far as Ford motors go. So after that, like I know Cummins, but I don't know I think there's a 4BT and a 6. I don't know enough about them. But I want to say it was a 4-cylinder diesel, but it was in a magazine. So, or an online version of a magazine, whatever you want to call them these days, newfangled online magazine.
Yeah.
But it was badass.
So Ryan, who asked that question from Everything is Broken Garage, he's kind of our resident Volkswagen diesel guy. Everything he wants to do is diesel swap or diesel this or diesel that. And I'm okay with that. But a different friend of mine has kind of got me onto the Mercedes diesels, the inline sixes. And they classify those as like the 2JZ of diesel engines. So they say in stock form, you can crank those P pumps up and get yourself like 600 horsepower, whatever. So the whole idea for my lifted Grand Marquis was to find one of these diesels and swap it out, swap the drivetrain out. I've since sold it, but at the end of the day, it's still something that I want to do, and I want to do that performance for simply one reason: is there's nobody out there who's as stupid as I want to be, who wants to put a diesel in a Crown Vic or a Grand Marquis. So I want to do that. I want to get it online. I want people to, a million different people to come watch that video, and just see that, just because it's stupid doesn't mean it shouldn't be done.
Oh, for sure. I mean, welcome to modifying Crown Vics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the whole premise, guys, behind ADTR is, at some point, Chris had to say, this is a really stupid idea. But here he is now, 17 years later, making a living at doing what he's doing with souping up these big coaches on wheels, so to speak. So, there's a business model for everything. Chris, you've done a great job with promoting and doing what you're doing with these things. Definitely keep up the good work. It's a small niche, but I think it's a growing niche because, like I said before, these cars are kind of the new to be hot rodded on the cheap for a lot of people. But for those who want to take it seriously, like you're doing with the Rocket Couch, you can go as big or as small as you want when it comes to upgrading. So you're doing a great job. I, for one, appreciate what you're doing for this Panther platform market, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be a part of our show tonight. So thanks for being here. I appreciate your time. We don't want to take you up any longer. I know that there's family obligations, and you guys are a little bit earlier on the West Coast. So again, thank you for being a part of the show and entertaining us and filling us full of some great knowledge on these Panther platforms tonight.
No, I mean, thank you very much for having me, and hopefully it was entertaining and yeah, whenever if I make the greatest hits next season, I'll gladly come back.
Well, we'd be happy to have you back for sure, no doubt. Jason, anything else you want to wrap up with there?
No, just well, I shouldn't say. I say no, and then I want to keep talking. But yes, there is. So, one is don't forget, guys, that the latest episode of the Get It and Drive podcast has been uploaded. It is live. You're not going to want to miss it. It's a very fun episode. Again, it's just John and I sitting there, kind of a backseat talk, having some fun. It's very entertaining. Make sure you go over to the Get It and Drive podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. Also, my latest episode on this pristine, I'm looking at it right now. I guess I'm drooling. 95 Ford F-150 short wheelbase, 4-wheel drive. It's an XL truck, 58,000 miles on this thing. So that video pops tomorrow evening. So make sure you have a chance to watch that. That's all I got, Grant. Go ahead and close us out.
Yep, just real quick. So the bandit asked a question, and I'll just advise him to watch the replay. Chris more or less covered that on the onset of the interview. As long as we're talking lifted Crown Vics, this has always been a favorite of mine. The pre-runner, you're sure the 1990, but otherwise, yeah, just that friendly reminder. So, well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate your time, and we hope hopefully you can close out the final quarter of 2022 here as one of the best for you in sales. Hopefully this show helps in some regards. I don't know how much, but otherwise, just that reminder, next week it is on my show. It's a shared venture, so we bounce back and forth. So hopefully you guys are tuned in to Straight Six Fan for next installment of the Car Guy and Six Fan Show. Otherwise, to all my Six fans out there, thanks for watching.